John chapter 18, the betrayal, denial, and trial of Jesus. John chapter 18 marks a dramatic shift in the narrative of Jesus' life, transitioning from his ministry and teachings to the beginning of his suffering and death. This chapter captures the betrayal, arrest, denial, interrogation, and trial of Jesus with a profound sense of purpose and divine control. While chaos, fear, and injustice swirl around him, Jesus remains composed, willingly embracing what lies ahead as part of God's redemptive plan. The chapter begins with Jesus entering a familiar garden, known as Gethsemane, with his disciples. Judas Iscariot, who had conspired with the religious authorities, arrives at the scene leading a detachment of soldiers and officials armed with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Though they come to arrest him, Jesus is not caught off guard. Instead, he steps forward and initiates the confrontation, asking, "Whom are you seeking?" When they respond to Jesus of Nazareth, he replies, "I am he." This statement carries divine significance, echoing God's self-identification in the Old Testament. The power of his words causes the arresting party to draw back and fall to the ground, a symbolic moment that affirms his authority even in the face of betrayal. In the midst of the arrest, Peter impulsively draws a sword and strikes the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Jesus immediately rebukes him, telling him to sheath the sword and submitting to the cup the Father has given him. This act of surrender reflects Jesus' full understanding of his mission and his refusal to resist the path of suffering. His concern for his disciples' safety and his refusal to let them be harmed shows both his protective nature and the fulfillment of his earlier promise not to lose any of those entrusted to him. Jesus is first taken to Annas, the father-in-law of the current high priest, Caiaphas. Annas questions Jesus about his disciples and teachings. Jesus responds by emphasizing that he has always taught openly, never in secret. When struck by an officer for what was perceived as insolence, Jesus calmly challenges the injustice, asking for evidence of wrongdoing. This interaction underscores both the illegitimacy of the trial and Jesus' unwavering commitment to truth, even when physically mistreated. Meanwhile, Peter follows at a distance and faces his own crisis of faith. Though he had boldly declared his loyalty earlier, he now denies knowing Jesus 3 times. These denials, especially when confronted by someone related to the man whose ear he had cut off, reveal the weakness of human resolve under pressure. As the rooster crows, the weight of Jesus' prediction comes crashing down on Peter, marking a moment of deep failure and sorrow. After Annas, Jesus is sent to Caiaphas, and then to the Roman governor Pilate. The religious leaders, eager to see Jesus executed, refused to enter Pilate's headquarters to avoid ceremonial defilement before the Passover. This irony is striking. They are more concerned with ritual purity than the grave injustice they are about to commit. Pilate, skeptical of the accusations, questions Jesus about his identity and kingship. Jesus explains that his kingdom is not of this world. If it were, his followers would fight to prevent his arrest. Instead, his kingdom is spiritual, rooted in truth. He declares that he was born to bear witness to the truth, and all who belong to the truth listen to his voice. Pilate responds with the cynical question, "What is truth?" a statement that reveals either his confusion, indifference, or frustration. Despite acknowledging that he finds no fault in Jesus, Pilate hesitates to release him, perhaps fearing political repercussions. In an attempt to appease the crowd, he offers to release one prisoner as part of a Passover custom. But the crowd, stirred by the leaders, chooses Barabbas, a known robber, over Jesus. This final moment highlights the tragic irony of the situation. The people reject the innocent Son of God in favor of a criminal, a symbol of humanity's blindness and rebellion. John 18, though filled with betrayal, denial, and injustice, is ultimately a testament to Jesus' resolve and divine authority. He does not resist arrest, retaliate against violence, or plead for his life. Instead, he walks willingly into suffering, fully aware that this is the path through which salvation will come. The chapter reveals the weakness of even his closest followers, the corruption of religious and political systems, and the contrast between earthly kingdoms and the kingdom of God. Through it all, Jesus stands as the embodiment of truth, love, and obedience, determined to fulfill the mission for which he was sent.
Chapter 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, of those whom you gave me I have lost none." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest, and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door, and brought Peter in. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. The high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. Jesus answered him, "I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where the Jews always meet, and in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said." And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, "Do you answer the high priest like that?" Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him whose ear Peter cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter then denied again, and immediately a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Then Pilate said to them, "You take him, and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death," that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled when he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews, and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" Then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber.